Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more overly sarcastic productions. This time, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh. The Legends Summarized. I'm amazed that she has not done this one already. I thought she had, because it just makes sense that this would have been like one of the earliest Legends Summarized. But I guess not. Um, Before we dive in, though, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. Discord, Twitch, fucking go click them. The Epic of Gilgamesh is actually one I have read. I remember I read it in I think a senior year of high school. So it's been several years, and I don't really remember it at all. But I know I read it. Uh, yeah, that's really all I got to add here. Let's dive right in.
It's a common belief among storytellers that storytelling is the most important facet of humanity, which
You're damn right it is.
is a very understandable bias for us to have. And while branding it the absolute pinnacle of human nature might be a bit indulgent, there's something dizzyingly awe-inspiring about the endless chain of tales and legends that links us through 100,000 years of forgotten names and vanished lives.
I think you're just proving the point that yes, us storytellers, stories are the fucking best, dude. Like, it is. Stories are one of the things that are just human, you know? And I mean, it's something we attribute sometimes to animals as well. Like, if we hear animals kind of like talking to each other, you know, uh, um, we kind of assume that they're like, we kind of make a joke or whatever, that they're telling each other a story, things like that. Uh, but telling stories has been the way in which we remember history, the way in which we inspire. It's the fucking greatest, dude. Stories are the best.
Our roots run deep and dark through the forgotten places of history, stories so old we don't even realize how old they are. Some of those stories are stellar. In many places around the world, the Pleiades star cluster is referred to as the Seven Sisters, which is noteworthy because only 6 stars are visible, and in the myths, one of the 7 sisters is typically missing, dead or abducted or hiding in shame, leaving the other 6 behind. What's interesting is that there actually are 7 stars in the Pleiades, but 2 of them have drifted so close together that they cannot be distinguished with the naked eye. How does the
Oh,
myth know that there were once 7 sisters and that their number has been reduced? Well, there was a time when there were 7 visible stars in the Pleiades, 100,000 years ago. So maybe the story knows that they went from 7 to 6 because the story is 100,000 years old. Some of these stories
that's what's so cool. That's what's so fucking cool, dude. Ah,
describe a world that no longer exists. Australian Aboriginal mythology and folklore often warns of giant, dangerous creatures that align very, very closely with the megafauna that used to roam its plains, like the Diprotodon, megafauna that's been extinct for 40,000 years. Rock art in the region depicts
this is what's so cool, and this is what I feel like. This is actually one of the things that isn't done enough in fantasy stories. This is probably actually going to end up becoming more of a fantasy author reacts instead of a historian reacts. Uh, just because in terms of what I studied as a historian, this doesn't, this kind of discussion doesn't necessarily, isn't something I'm like, this kind of, these old of stories are not what I, you know, I did the 700s to 900s Anglo-Saxon England time period for my master's thesis. I don't know stories that date back 40,000 years, you know? Um, but I'm probably gonna still title it as Historian Reacts because that does a little bit better in the analytics. Anyways, this is one of the things that I've noticed, like when reading and writing, and especially now that Red's pointing out, I'm definitely more self-aware of it right now. Uh, but it's we don't. I feel like this is something that's not done enough, where we don't have authors talking about. They have stories that exist in their world. And usually, when those stories are mentioned, they are used as a means of talking about usually the things that are then mentioned in those stories are returning, right? Like when it comes to A Song of Ice and Fire, the old stories of the White Walkers, or well, of the others, uh, they are actively coming back, right? Same with the Children of the Forest, right? Any mention of that stuff, all of that is still within the world and coming back. We aren't hearing stories of something that is truly in fantasy. I feel like it is very rare, and I don't know any stories off the top of my head that I have read where we see uh where there are old ass legends within the world, and then the things that are mentioned within that leg in universe legend are actually truly extinct. They pretty much, as far as I know, they always come back. When the people are like talking about the dragons are, it's essentially um somewhat of a way of showcasing using Chekhov's gun. The story that's a legend is being mentioned, and it's a way of teasing the expansion of the story, right? Because a lot of the times stories start off pretty small and the stakes aren't, global, right? Within the first in A Song of Ice and Fire, one of the things is the story is really centered around the War of the Five Kings, but as the story goes on, it's, you know, becoming more obviously broadened out to be it's a story where like climate change. The best way I can just the others are a threat, or are potentially a threat, and the War of the Five Kings is a petty conflict, that sort of thing. We need to band together to stay alive, to avoid apocalypse, blah blah blah. And so like when legends are mentioned in A Song of Ice and Fire, anything there that's kind of said to be extinct isn't actually extinct, um, and is probably gonna be back. Uh, I think the closest thing is possibly unicorns, but a lot of people think that unicorns live on Skagos. Um, the Poppy War trilogy didn't really make mention of any legends that date that far back, so I can't really. That one's not a good example. John Gwynn's Bloodsworn saga doesn't have any like that. Only the gods are dead, but then the gods are coming back. Um, there really isn't uh any legends and stories in all in the fantasy worlds where the things that are being talked about are actually truly extinct. And that is partially due to the you got to keep things somewhat focused uh as a storyteller, right? So like within the within your fantasy novel, it may not be the always the best choice, but personally I'm doing it. I have legends where then there are things that are extinct. Not everything may be extinct. There may be some things hiding in the world, but there are things that are just like from a time so long ago that nature has played a role, and with the way that humanity spreads, um you know other species will suffer from the spreading of you know of a dominant hunter species. The right way to fucking phrase it, I don't know. um like we see that with the extinction of the Neanderthals, and how they like either you know I believe in the multiple theories kind of thing, where like it isn't just one thing that wiped out the Neanderthals. The Neanderthals interbred, obviously, because we have Neanderthal DNA, uh, um, and but also like they just weren't uh, Homo sapiens were in terms of evolution and longevity better designed than Neanderthals, and maybe also Neanderthals were susceptible or more susceptible to a sickness. I don't know. Um, but they're gone, right? There aren't multiple humans. It's just Homo sapiens. Even though, well, wouldn't Neanderthals be called humans? Because like humans is pretty much just Homo sapien, right? Anyways, I went that tangent.
Marsupial lions that have been extinct for a brisk 30,000 years. It's very cool to catch glimpses of the truly staggering longevity of storytelling, but unfortunately these cases are the exception and not the rule. While the lineage of many myths and legends can be theoretically traced back thousands of years to key events in the archaeological record that may have shaped them, it's the nature of stories to change with every telling, which is why searching for crisp historicity in ancient legends is a recipe for madness. The evolution of stories is very similar to biological evolution. It's often the odd little consistencies across a seemingly unrelated menagerie that let us identify and trace back a lineage, and just like in biology, in the grand scheme of storytelling, almost everything is lost. We might want to find or reconstruct the original version of these ancient tales, searching for those truly ancient stories, but the original is gone, shattered into the branches of a family tree with the vast majority of its defining narrative lost forever, only scraps and hints and fragments cluing us into what shape the common narrative ancestor might have once taken. The great tragedy of this kind of research is that sometimes things are just gone. Paleolithic cave paintings are eroded away by wind and water. The key historical details in a legend are lost when the teller doesn't think them interesting enough to pass along to the next generation. A civilization's records are miraculously preserved, but the language they're written in dies out, and so the knowledge
But I think I'm gonna disagree with Red here on the sadness of losing the original thing, right? And the reason I disagree, and of course it is a little bit tragic that we do not have the original story for a lot of our what we consider our ancient stories, right? We don't have the original version of the Iliad, the Odyssey, blah, stuff like that. Um, but I'm gonna disagree here because I know she's a storyteller, and of course maybe this was just poorly worded. I don't know, or maybe she'll explain to restate this later. I don't know. I'm sure Red is, aware of this and also would agree on what I'm about. But like ultimately, when it comes to telling a story, and I think the ancient people here, the important things when it comes to telling a story are those common links, right? The uh, the themes. The themes are what give a story longevity. Um, that's just I don't know why that is, but when we look at the stories that have the most meaning to us, they are always the ones that have an intrinsic theme to them that the majority of humans care about. Now, of course, also over the course of time, maybe there are some themes that have fallen out of popularity, and maybe from one generation to the next, that one generation was like, that theme within the story, we're gonna change it or whatever. But also, then you could also argue, counterpoint to what I just said there, is well, a lot of the themes of ancient stories have still transcended time. So, like, they probably have relatively remained consistent in terms of the themes being told, but the specificities are what change from generation to generation. Um, so like, it's like, yeah, it's a shame we don't know the exact specifics because maybe if we knew the exact specifics of some stories, we would get a greater understanding of the cultures of the time period, right? But I feel like to say that we've lost the originals isn't entirely accurate because I would like to think that we still have their original themes in mind. Not original in the way that they would have told them, but the theme still gets across even after all this time. And I think that is what is most important when it comes to telling a story. I hope I made sense. I feel like I said something really smart for once, or it was really dumb and made no sense at all.
dies with them. Geological upheaval buries a city under 100 meters of rock, and within 200 years, nobody remembers its name. Storytelling may not be the most important thing humanity is responsible for, but it is alive.
Uh, no, I think it's the most important thing. Well, Well, we could end up killing ourselves because, humanity is pretty much like a virus on the earth, and we are making it unsustainable for ourselves, which honestly is perhaps the greatest stupidity any species has ever done in the history of the universe. Like, if you really think about it, we're fucking ourselves over. We're not fucking the world over. No, the world will be fine. The world will survive. The world was once on fire, and now it's not. But humanity is about to make it unlivable for humanity. Other species will go on. Life will continue. Humans won't, because especially if we keep being stupid. Uh, they're like, Uh, but I think in regards to, so like, as long as we don't die, I think stories are our most important thing. I mean, yeah.
And like all alive things, it dies very easily. This is
Life
why it
needs
is
things to
truly,
live.
genuinely incredible that we have the Epic of Gilgamesh. Before 1853, the Epic of Gilgamesh was a pile of broken pottery in an Assyrian ruin. Before 1872, it was a pile of broken pottery in the basement of the British Museum. It wasn't until
God damn it, Britain.
Assyriologist George Smith translated the cuneiform in the Flood Tablet, which would later be known as Part 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh, that it became clear that there was a story here, a coherent written narrative older than anything anyone had found before.
This is why I hate the Victorians. They fucking put this shit in the basement and didn't even fucking look at it and try and translate. Like, fuck the Victorians, dude.
It was only a fragment, but it told an epic tale of a cataclysmic flood very similar to the one in the Tanakh, and they still had a lot of broken pottery to go. There is no single complete version of the Epic of Gilgamesh. The oldest stories about him we have access to are Sumerian from the 18th century BCE, where his exploits were literally used as writing homework for scribes, which is why we have about 5 million copies of them. In these poems, Gilgamesh is called Bilgamesh, and while a few details from the overall epic show up, like Enkidu being Gilgamesh's best friend and Gilgamesh overall being a totally badass king, it doesn't have a whole lot to do with the epic, and it's clear that there was basically a corpus of episodic folklore about Gilgamesh popular in the cultural consciousness long before his story was consolidated into the epic. There was also clearly a prototypical version of the Epic of Gilgamesh in cultural circulation before it was locked down by the poet and scribe Sinlique Unini somewhere between the 13th and 11th century BCE, when he wrote down what is now considered to be the standard version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, or as it was called at the time, He Who Saw the Deep. Now, 3,000 years of wear and tear on the
Why is Red muffled?
tablets has left the story somewhat fragmented, but because this tale was so popular in various forms, new tablets with chunks of the Epic of Gilgamesh are being discovered all the time. Every new translation is more complete than the previous ones because it has more to work from. This is the rare, beautiful case where a lost story was rediscovered, and instead of being half a fragment of a scrap of an oblique reference with absolutely no hope of recovery, it was literally an entire saga. We've known about this epic, the oldest known work of literature, for less than 200 years. A combination of luck and skill and some very, very determined archaeologists have given us back something we could have very easily lost forever. And part of what makes the Epic of Gilgamesh so interesting is that its own narrative themes apply to it on a metatextual level. The Epic of Gilgamesh, a legend that was dead and forgotten for 2,000 years, is a story about death, legacy, and immortality. So let's talk about it. The story begins with a glowing attestation of the beautiful and magnificent city of Uruk, and an equally glowing description of Gilgamesh, a great hero king, unbelievably
He's yoked.
Huge, powerful, and strong, most likely in large part because he is 1/3 man, 2/3 god. However, despite being a great
3 stars, good tax policy, and an impressive monster-killing resume. 2 stars off since he bounced me like a basketball for half an hour in the courtyard of Nana's temple and banged my wife. I like how the way this is phrased is kind of like his problem is more like more off the fact that Gilgamesh bounced him like a basketball, and then like secondary is he also fucked my wife.
Great king, Gilgamesh is kind of a terrible person, harassing the young men of his city in some unspecified way and harassing the young women in a very specified way. The gist is that when a young woman
Hello, Nin Sun. I'd like to file a complaint. Yeah, it's called the Royal Game of I'll tell you the rules later.
Gets married, she spends her wedding night with Gilgamesh first and her actual husband second. This is not a great arrangement for anyone but Gilgamesh, and the women of Uruk are just about sick of it, so they petition the gods for help. The gods roll up and deliberate.
For the last time, we are not doing another mass extinction. So what's your plan, smart guy? Okay, hear me out. We make a bigger guy. Fucking genius.
What to do about Gilgamesh being a huge turbo tyrant, and eventually they decide the only logical solution is to create Gilgamesh's equal, someone who can stand up to him and make him chill out. The goddess Aruru, creator
He could stand to be just a little buffer.
humanity, shapes some clay into a massive and powerful wild man called Enkidu, an absolute and literal beast who spends his days in the
Absolute dump truck.
wilderness with the animals, causing problems for the local hunters, which means the number of unstoppably powerful demigods causing problems for innocent locals has changed from 1 to 2.
Oh god, it's increased by 100%.
Work team. The hunters try and figure out what to
It's hopeless. We've tried everything. Well, not exactly true.
do about this huge monster man that keeps wrecking their traps and freeing their prey, and they settle on the creative solution of calling in an expert on getting men to behave, the legendary prostitute Shamhat, whose
I mean, you know what? I forget the wild man's name already. I'd have the same reaction.
reputation turns out to be well-earned because after engaging Enkidu for an entire week, the
Enkidu.
man has somehow learned language, showering, social skills, table manners, and how to immediately go at it for another week.
Nice. How dare he ruin the wholesome fun of consensual boining? I have nothing more to teach you. Consensual king, let's go.
Between completing her Tarzan speedrun any percent, Shamhat tells Enkidu about the legendary king Gilgamesh, and he catches wind of Gilgamesh's abuses of power, and immediately resolves to go and fight him 1v1. Enkidu and Shamhat head to Uruk, and the people marvel at this strange, wild man. Animalistic in nature, but just as strong and powerful as Gilgamesh himself. As Gilgamesh makes his way
Not one step further. Oh, you're challenging me, the god's specialist boy.
to the newest newlywed in town, Enkidu blocks his path and challenges him to single combat. They fight, and while the details of their clash are obscured by damage to the tablet, when the signal fuzzes back in, Gilgamesh and Enkidu stop fighting,
Dude, your hands are so soft. Oh, yeah, you know, king stuff. Not much hard labor. I got calluses.
kiss,
Mine aren't
decide to be best friends for life.
Wait a minute, hold on, go back.
When the signal fuzzes back in, Gilgamesh and Enkidu stop fighting, kiss, decide to be best friends for life, and then Gilgamesh introduces
Mom, look at my guy wife. He's just as lovely as your prophetic dreams indicated.
Enkidu to his mom, officially setting the first world record for the enemies to lovers trope, which has yet to be surpassed. A couple lines later, Gilgamesh decides on a whim that he wants to go and kill a big monster, a terrifying fire-breathing creature by the name of Humbaba. And when Enkidu asks why
The fire-breathing, unsleeping, divinely appointed guardian of the sacred forest? I guess I'll be excited for the both of us.
hell they would do that, Gilgamesh calls him a wuss and goes to do it anyway. Absolutely nobody can dissuade Gilgamesh from this idea, so the two of them gear up and head to the forest of cedar that Humbaba guards. On the way, Gilgamesh has a
And what do you think the mountain represents? How huge this bad idea was? Knowing you? Definitely not.
series of scary symbolic nightmares, but every time he gets freaked out, Enkidu manages to explain why the scary symbolic nightmare is actually a good thing, and I'd love to give you more details about what the dreams were and how they could possibly be good, but sorry, tablet busted, who dis? All that matters is the boys make it to the forest of cedar, catch Humbaba's trail, and square up with him.
I love the taste of trespassers. Sorry, I already have a boy best friend. History would remember them as roommates.
Humbaba talks a little smack,
Bro, was this a bad idea? I guess I'll be excited for the both of us.
Gilgamesh gets nervous, Enkidu affectionately calls him a wuss, and they fight. And with the help of a little bit of divine intervention, courtesy of Gilgamesh's goddess mom, Humbaba is pinned down by the wind so Gilgamesh can slay him. Enkidu briefly worries that killing a monster created by the gods might upset the gods a little bit. I'm sure that won't come back later. Or immediately. When the boys make it back to Uruk with a ton of high-quality cedar wood in tow, Gilgamesh gets himself cleaned up after his long and arduous journey and is immediately ambushed by the goddess Ishtar, who thinks he's really hot and wants to marry him. Gilgamesh enumerates a large
There was that Tammuz guy, the bird, the lion, the thing with the horse, the dude you turned into a wolf. Frankly, the animal thing is getting very suspicious. She's
number of
sus,
reasons
dude.
he's not going to do that, in the form of a list of all of Ishtar's exes that have suffered various horrible fates, and Ishtar gets really upset and storms back to the heavens in a rage. She asks her parents, Anu and Antu, if she can borrow the Bull of Heaven and have it kill Gilgamesh, and makes it clear that her alternative plan is to smash down the gates of the underworld and raise up the dead so they devour the living. Rather than dealing with the paperwork of an ancient Mesopotamian zombie apocalypse, Anu gives her the Bull of Heaven and she unleashes it on an unsuspecting Uruk. It's an absolute nightmare of a monster, with its very presence boiling the rivers and cracking the earth, but Enkidu and Gilgamesh manage manage to defeat it through the cunning strategy of hitting it really hard. They sacrifice various parts of the bowl to various different gods, throw a party, and go to sleep. Job well done, boys. Unfortunately, Enkidu dreams that a council of the gods convenes to discuss how Enkidu and Gilgamesh can be punished for killing not one but two sacred creatures crafted by the gods. The gods agree that one of them should die for it, and unfortunately for Enkidu, the reluctant consensus, even among the gods that like them, is that Gilgamesh is a lot less disposable than Enkidu. He wakes up heartbroken, knowing that his death is inevitable and coming soon to a civilization near you. While Gilgamesh tries to petition the gods,
He lured me with bread. She lured me with bread and boobs and stuff. Dude, I would have fallen for the same trap. It's okay. It's okay, Enkidu. I would have fallen for it too. Even if I was aware of it being like a trap, I'd still have gone through with it.
to spare him, Enkidu privately breaks down and laments to Shamash the sun god, cursing the hunter and Shamhat that took him away from his peaceful, ignorant, wild existence and doomed him to a life weakened by civilization and knowledge, forcing him to forever be lesser than his great friend.
But did you like... I was about to say this exact thing. But did you like the bread? Yes. And the boobs? Oh, for sure. And it sounds like she helped you make a life worth living, huh? Thanks, Peacemaker, even. I'm loving this
Shamash gently
episode.
chastises him for cursing the people that gave him his life and his friendship with Gilgamesh, and Enkidu calms down a little. So to make up for cursing Shamhat, he turns around and blesses her to be incredibly home-wreckingly hot and have a lot of great boning for the rest of her life. Despite his little moment of closure, Enkidu
I am trying to face this with dignity!
is not resting peacefully quite yet. He has a second dream where a terrifying lion birdman attacks him and drags him into the sunless underworld, where he's paraded before a menagerie of death gods. When he wakes up, he's sick, and his
boy,
illness
it's
worsens
happening.
over the next 12 days.
Enkidu, I think you're a little paranoid, my
On
boy.
his deathbed, Enkidu tells
Things
Gilgamesh that he
ain't
feared
getting
dying in
anxious.
battle, but he now wishes he'd at least had the fame and glory of a violent death. A slow, lingering illness brings him nothing at all. Enkidu dies, and Gilgamesh is heartbroken. He commissions a massive statue of Enkidu, drains his treasury to commission sacrifices for the gods so that they'll favor Enkidu, and ultimately spirals into a full-blown existential crisis. In this state, Gilgamesh leaves Uruk and sets out for the farthest reaches of the world in search of a legendary man named Utnapishtim, who along with his wife are the only people who have ever become immortal. Gilgamesh makes his way through the wilderness,
Wait, are we gonna have a Zuko redemption arc here?
still quite powerful, but now also quite frightened thanks to his rolling existential crisis. So he's still defeating lions with his bare hands, but now he's sad about it. He reaches the Twin Mountains where the sun rises, guarded by
Oh, fucking this. Now, one of us always tells the truth, and frankly, he's clearly not in the
two
mood.
scorpion men who
Oh,
let him
right.
pass when he tells them he's seeking Utnapishtim. He travels through the dark, sunless void for 12 double hours.
Well, hold on. Isn't one of us always tells the truth, and the other one... Wouldn't it be the person saying the thing, like, one of us always tells the truth and the other one lies? Wouldn't that be the guy telling the truth? Or if that's the guy lying, then they both are liars. Right? Right? Like am I thinking too deep? Like,
Who let him pass when he tells them he's seeking Utnapishtim. He travels through the dark, sunless void for 12 double hours before he finally emerges into a strange garden of stone and crystal trees at the edge of a vast ocean. An old goddess directs him to the boatman that can take
excuse me, I'm looking for immortality. Yeah. Second grove on the left, tip the boatman when you get there. Thanks.
into Utnapishtim, a man named Urshanabi currently working in a forest with a large group of strange stone men. But Gilgamesh interprets her directions as instructions to fight Urshanabi and the stone men, which makes the
Oh, wait, you're the boatman. Are you 2/3 god, 1/3 idiot? Yeah, maybe 2/3 idiot, 1/3 god.
process of getting to Utnapishtim extra complicated, because the stone men Gilgamesh smashes to bits are the people who are supposed to be manning the dang boat. Urshanabi and Gilgamesh end up having to man it themselves, including a rather perilous section where they need to pull the boat through a band of deadly water and improvise a sail out of their own clothes. But Gilgamesh finally lands unscathed on the
Greetings, immortal one. The mighty Gilgamesh graces you with his presence and his booty cheeks.
far shore and meets Utnapishtim, who is very unimpressed with him. Gilgamesh asks Utnapishtim how he
Please, I only want to know how you became immortal. It's not your real question, but I'll answer anyway.
acquired immortality, and Utnapishtim tells him the tale. A long, long time ago, Utnapishtim lived
galaxy
in
far,
the
far
great
away?
city of Shudapak, where one night the god Ea came to him in a dream and
Okay, don't freak out, but I need you to freak out.
told him to forsake his house, abandon his wealth, and build an enormous boat, filling it with everything needed for life to survive. Ea does not elaborate why this is necessary, but helpfully provides him with a cover story for this apparent madness. If anybody asks, Utnapishtim has somehow incurred the wrath of the god Enlil, a notoriously volatile god of wind and storms, and so Utnapishtim has to go live in Ea's oceanic realm. Ea also says that he can tell the others that soon Shudapak will experience a rain of plenty, a shower of bread cakes, and a torrent of wheat. Ea's suspicious caginess and oddly meteorological metaphors clearly alarm Utnapishtim because he obeys without question, emptying his treasury and sacrificing his livestock to ensure his workmen are very richly compensated for building the massive ark as quickly and as well as possible. Utnapishtim loads up the boat with his family, some workmen and artisans, and a whole bunch of animals. On the day Ea warned him of, he seals the hatch, and the rain begins to fall. A deluge unlike any other drowns the city and drives the gods up into Anu's realm, most of them grieving the destruction and the death of humanity. After 7 days, the rain finally stops, and Utnapishtim cracks the hatch to survey the terrain. The outlook is not good. There's ocean as far as the eye can see, and only the highest mountain peaks are visible as tiny, barren islands. He grounds the ship on one of them and starts sending out birds to look for livable land, and after 2 failures, he releases a raven that flies far enough to see the waters
Boss, dirt spotted. If only we'd held out on eating the unicorns.
receding. Utnapishtim makes a sacrifice to the gods, and being basically the only human alive and currently praying, all the gods turn up, including Enlil, who the other
You've got a lot of nerve. At least I kept my word, mister. I definitely won't tell anyone about your awesome murder plan.
gods are none too pleased with, because it turns out Enlil is the one who came up with this dumb flood plan himself to try and fix overpopulation, and somehow convince the other gods to be sworn to secrecy about it. Enlil is furious
And we didn't even get all of them. That's a good thing. Then why am I angry? I ask that every day.
that Utnapishtim survived, but Ea calls him a dingus for orchestrating this whole unnecessarily dramatic debacle, and Enlil calms down. He takes Utnapishtim and his wife and declares that they are now immortal like the gods, and decrees that they'll live far away from the rest of the world at the source of all rivers. So Utnapishtim and his wife are whisked away to this beautiful and alien land, and that brings them to today. Since Gilgamesh
Nice.
doesn't have the option of surviving a cataclysmic flood and convening every god in the world to talk about it, he's not
But I can't use that at all. Wow, that's so weird. It's almost like immortality doesn't just happen.
entirely sure what he's supposed to take from this, so Utnapishtim tells him if he wants to conquer death, he's gonna have to start by conquering sleep. He challenges Gilgamesh to
Oh,
stay
no.
awake for 7 nights, which Gilgamesh declares to be child's play before immediately passing out. When he's eventually nudged awake, he insists it was only a brief doze, only to see that Utnapishtim's wife has helpfully baked him a fresh loaf of bread for every day he was asleep. There are 7 of them in total, 5 of which have become completely inedible. This is very disheartening for Gilgamesh, and while Utnapishtim won't give him a do-over, he does take pity on the poor guy and cheers him up with a nice hot bath and a makeover to get all the depression gunk off him. He also kicks out his boatman, presumably so nobody else winds up on his front lawn with delusions of grandeur. As Gilgamesh and the boatman go to leave, Utnapishtim gives Gilgamesh one more option to stave off the Reaper, a rare plant found under the ocean that restores the youth to anyone who eats it. Gilgamesh immediately dives in and finds it and plans to bring it back to Uruk and test it on some random old guy before downing it himself, but then he leaves it unattended and a snake eats it. Womp womp. With Gilgamesh's pursuit of immortality officially
That's rough, buddy.
completely pointless and with no way back to Utnapishtim or the plant, he despondently returns to Uruk, and the story ends the way it began, with a description of the wonder and majesty of this great city, far greater than the life of any one man. There
What did that say? Oh yeah, no, I would have gone mad with grief too. The man's a snack. He really was.
one man. There is something incredibly poignant about reading this story almost 5,000 years after its historical setting. If the historical
Okay, so we totally do not have the ending to the Epic of Gilgamesh, do we? There's totally more to it. I wonder if we'll ever
Gilgamesh, who
find
ruled
the
Uruk sometime
ending.
between 2900 and 2350 BCE, truly suffered the memento mori crisis that his fictional counterpart did, then it's a strange form of immortality he's found himself in. One, like Utnapishtim, granted by no action of his own, but by the choices of a group he had no power over. The people of Uruk told his stories for 1,000 years after his death before they were codified in the tablets we have now, a distant, abstracted immortality very far away from the world of the living. Gilgamesh could not have an immortal life, but when he gazes on Uruk and sings its praises in the final lines of the tablet, he hints at the immortality he will inadvertently achieve. He was terrified of death, but when he stopped running from it and returned to the city he lived to protect and rule, he became a king worth immortalizing, worth telling stories about for 2,000 years, stories then worth recovering and translating 2,000 years after that. Immortality is memory and legacy and history. It isn't outrunning death, it's outlasting it. Storytelling may not be the most important thing humanity's ever done, but it is how we share the gift of immortality with the people and stories that we love. And in a very real way, it's an honor to carry that on. But while we're talking retellings, look, I couldn't give less of a shit about the Fate franchise, but it drives me up the fucking wall that this is their design for Gilgamesh. This?
Yeah.
This gold-plated broomstick? 2/3 god with a 6-cubit stride? You're telling me it's not this beefy muscle man? You're telling me that is supposed to be Alexander the Great? Who did all of his best work before he was 25? It's a rare treat for the Fate franchise to have designs that even come close to making sense. But these designs would actually kind of work if you just switched them.
I was about, yeah.
And instead they did this, and I hate it. I hate it so much. I can't believe they do this to me.
For this video, I mostly referenced Andrew George's version, which is very good at being extremely specific about citing individual tablets and filling holes in the original text with cited alternatives from other source documents. It's also quite good at not overdoing the poetic license, so if you're looking for a very solid, robust version of the epic that's as close to the original cuneiform as you can get, I recommend this one. Gilgamesh is the exact opposite of the "that can't be it, where's the rest of it" meme. Yeah. We're always finding new bits and bobs that make it hold together just that little bit better. For instance, back in 2015, they found a new tablet that clarified that Enkidu and Shemot actually boned down for 2 weeks instead of... Meaning, the trope of jarringly disruptive sex scenes that go on for way too long is literally the oldest literary tradition in human history. Yeah? Picture an Akkadian teenager wincing and turning away from the tablet because their parents are reading over their shoulder. I will always be mad at about the Fate School characters. And that was Legend Summarized, the Epic of Gilgamesh. I think I still enjoy, in terms of the Legend Summarized, I think I still enjoyed their Red's Trojan War one. That one was just, I really loved the imagery and the art that Red did for the Trojan War one. This one was good. This one was very entertaining. I loved it. I hope you guys enjoyed too. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.